Not too long ago, I seem to remember when Jason Bermas once said this.
If you're investigating a plane crash and the plane and the bodies aren't there and visible, there's a problem. And that debris field is
found subsequently. So are you saying that the subsequent debris and remains of the bodies that were found?
No, I'm saying that the chances are, hold on, I'm saying that the chances are likely, because it's an 8-mile debris field, right? Because they found not only that, but identification and all that other stuff. You could easily say that those bodies were identified via fragments. All the evidence shows whatever happened there, something was out of the sky.
They were not, the bodies were not intact. It was
well, again, man, I'm going to say it. There's not a time in history that a jet goes down in an open field and you may have, people that don't have heads or are badly burned. You got the body, bro. You got maybe a torso was ripped. It's not like they're looking for fragments and they're not on the scene. If you can point to one other commercial plane crash where anybody who is a primary investigator and shows up, and we've showed multiple, says there's no bodies and no evidence of a plane, I will not only shake your hand, I will stop showing people. If you're investigating a plane crash.
There you have it. I seem to remember when you made that claim. So now, what do? What comes next? I don't know what to tell you from this point on because you have rejected any type of conversation with me, and that's fine. But I remember. I didn't forget that challenge. Certain people remembered that challenge.
See, Pepperidge Farm remembers.
Everyone remembers. So the challenge that you made was partaken by myself and my co-researcher, DJ Thermal Detonator. And what you did was you basically ignored DJ Thermal Detonator because you had him on block and you called me a troll. But then when you went on Reed Coverdale's show last year, you made a couple more statements that were more ludicrous than the challenge itself. So let's listen.
The claim that a lot of people make is there's no other time in history where a plane has crashed and you can't find large pieces of the plane, you can't find bodies.
There isn't. And listen, again,
hold on.
If we're talking about a mountain range, if we're talking about a mountain range, we're talking about rock, number one. We're not talking about soft soil, correct? This was an
when you're going,
field. We are talking about two different things. And
well, that's disingenuous at best because you didn't say that on McDermott when you interviewed McDermott there. You said, show me a plane crash that's resembling Flight 93. And you were shown two examples. One from DJ Detonator regarding PSA 1771. And I gave another, which was Germanwings 9525. And then you moved the goalpost and said, well, Germanwings 9525 was basically crashing into rocks. All of a sudden, topography is now a factor. Well, no, I tried to show you that an intentional plane crash going at a high speed won't leave much of the plane or bodies. Nevertheless, you were shown another example where 1771 crashed into an open field. And then you said regarding that scenario that you never looked into it. And then you said you would. But you never did really, did you? It's expected. And this is the reason why I don't take you as a serious researcher. And then, look, you're not going to debate myself or DJ Thornton because we're no threat, right? We're small channels. I'm being the smallest out of the three between myself, DJ Thornton, and Ryan Dawson. But I'm the smallest channel of all. So you could just dismiss me and call me a troll, even though I have more in the way of work than you do. What do you got? Loose change? So you got a fringe conspiracy film that helped to manipulate and disinform probably over 1 million people at this point. Bravo. You really did a job for the 9/11 truth movement. Um, but then it doesn't stop there, does it?
I'll say it again. I think the evidence of the planes that hit the World Trade Centers, they look like drones to me.
Right there, right? They look like drones to you, right? So not only do you not believe a plane crashed into Shanksville, that, or if you do, it was shot down and it wasn't Flight 93. You question whether a plane hit the Pentagon. You definitely don't believe Flight 77 hit the Pentagon. And here you are. For the first time, I'd never heard you say that Flight 11 and 175 didn't crash into the World Trade Center. You're saying they're drones because there was pods underneath. And you actually even mentioned on Reed Coverdale's show that that white flash is resemblance of a missile being shot. Now, I played the interview of Stanley Pramath. Stanley Pramath actually was an employee of Fuji Bank, and he was at the 83rd floor of the South Tower. Now, if there was a missile being shot into the South Tower, he wouldn't have survived, right? He would have been dead because that's exactly where he was working at. He had to duck under his desk, and the plane crashed right above into the roof of his building. He managed to survive. Brian Clark, who also worked at Fuji Bank, basically heard him yelling and saved him. I think there was only 16 people that managed to survive the impact of Flight 175 into the South Tower. So unless you're willing to say that these people are either in on it or coerced, I can't see how your thoughts or your points regarding the planes being drones, where you actually do say that the planes were hijacked, but they were switched in midair with planes or drones. What sense would that make? Why not allow the planes to basically just crash into the towers, hereby just effectively killing everyone on board? Why would you risk radar to pick up the planes being removed in midair? And by the way, now you're saying that the National Transportation Safety Board, basically the radar data, which covered all 4 flights, is also manipulated. Now, where's your evidence for that? You may have the convenience to basically say what you say about 9/11, but there are going to be people like myself who are going to hold you to those positions. I'm challenging you on those positions. What evidence do you have? I don't want to hear about speculation. I want to hear about information, knowledge. But you're not going to address this. So in essence, this video basically is, I'm hoping, to be seen by people who follow you or watch Loose Change or Fabled Enemies and follow you, work on Rofkin or whatever. Now, I would submit to people that they should watch Loose Change and they should watch Fabled Enemies, especially Loose Change, because I want you to see the amount of errors that that film makes. And I want you to follow Jason Bermas because I want you to see all the mistakes he still makes about 9/11. And this is not a once in a lifetime. This is a recurring theme with him regarding the many theories he posits, which are basically just fictitious. They're basically his own fantasy, speculation. There's no evidence behind a couple of things that he states, including this one that I just played. But there's more. There's more. And he would go on his own show. And I think in this one that I'm going to show next, he did with MMA, retired MMA fighter, John Fitch, who, by the way, I really like John Fitch. I'm a MMA fan. I collect rare programs and stuff. And I've been following MMA all the way back to Pancrase, 1993. And I still watch MMA to the current day. So he went on Jason's own show, and it doesn't just stop with, drones on, planes as drones and missiles underneath, but also at Shanksville, where he misconstrues statements made by certain people. In this case, it's the FBI. So let's take a look at this and see what's wrong.
I think we finally arrived out at the scene between 2 and 3 o'clock that afternoon. The plane crashed shortly after 10 a.m. So we had an RA out near that site, and they responded initially.
We would have been the first because it's 20 minutes from the office as we drove that day. I expected to see fuselage, remnants of a plane, which I didn't see anything but pretty much smoke and some fires.
I saw absolutely no signs that an airplane was present, no matter what direction I looked.
You didn't know that a plane had crashed there. You had a crater, and the initial crater was probably 15 feet deep, but we didn't have big plane parts laying everywhere.
I mean, am I crazy? Or do all three of them all say there's nothing there that they saw that a plane had crashed there? But I'm crazy for asking the question. Now listen to
It just vaporized on impact.
Now this guy, the bald guy, is going
to
to
make us believe it vaporized in impact.
and we have an 8-mile debris field, and we couldn't recover bodies, but we did recover a red bandana. Okay, and this guy's going to tell you now that you could tell that the whole plane had sunk in, and you could see the wing marks. Okay, that's how crazy this thing is.
I think
it's not. Listen, it's not as crazy as you think it is, and you're making a big mistake here, right? Because these FBI agents that went there, if they ever saw a plane crash in their life, they're used to seeing large pieces of the plane, right? Wings, a tail, whole engines, even large pieces of fuselage, landing gear, right? Why? Why are they used to seeing that? Again, I have to make the point that those planes were not trying to intentionally crash while being fully loaded with jet fuel. Flight 93 crashed on impact at a 90-degree angle. I'm sorry, a 45-degree angle, going 63 miles an hour, or 563 miles an hour, while carrying 87,000 pounds of fuel. That's 13,000 gallons. We never saw this in history, besides one time, PSA 1771. After it, we saw it with Germanwings 9525 in 2015. Intentional plane crashes, where the plane is crashing at the full speeds possible. With PSA 1771, it broke the sound barrier when it was going over 700 miles an hour. Flight 93 was going 563 miles an hour at the time of impact. And of course, Jason, you never care to mention about the residents of Somerset County who also, many dozens, who saw the plane actually crash into the field. Paula Pluta, Eric Peterson, Kelly Levernight. Those are just some of them. And of course, like I said, these FBI agents probably never saw in their life an intentional plane crash. And of course, you're not going to find whole bodies. Just think for a second. A body is 90% water. Do you really think that a body, even a large part of the body, is going to survive the impact of a plane at 563 miles an hour into topsoil with 87,000 pounds of fuel, in essence, a bomb? They're going to become almost molecules, which was basically what happened to these people on the plane. And you make it a habit of saying that, oh, these FBI agents are basically saying, well, there's no evidence of a plane. Of course, there's not going to be any huge evidence of a plane there. It blew up. It just almost disintegrated on impact, just like what happened at the Pentagon. We saw 4 plane hijackings, 4 planes crashing into World Trade Center, 2 of them, 1 into the Pentagon, 1 in Shanksville. It's never happened before in history, past or present. We never saw intentional hijackings, multiple in one day, let alone in history. Very few, very few. That's why everybody compares regular plane crashes with intentional plane crashes, and it's disingenuous. If you're going to compare a plane who's dumping the fuel, trying to land on its belly at the lowest speeds possible, as comparing to what the planes were doing on 9/11, where they were crashing at the highest speeds possible while being fully loaded. It's disingenuous. But I could see the mistake people make. I can understand why. But you don't help any by not researching properly about why there's little plane debris. You just go with people's statements and say, you see, that just goes to show you that they're against the official narrative. Well, let me ask you something, Jason Bermas. Why would the FBI basically go against the script? Why? Not to mention, like I said, the eyewitnesses who were there, who saw the plane crash. Now you have to say that those people were in on it. Now, how do you prove that? You can't. Let's go to Wally Miller, because this is where your biggest beef comes from, right? Well, let's see what you have to say here.
And he goes, hey, come out here. A plane hit the World Trade Center.
Minutes later, a second plane hit the second tower.
Finally, we got word at the Pentagon that there was an explosion at the Pentagon. So I didn't know much about that either. I thought, wow, we're getting attacked or something.
About 10 minutes passed, Wally got a call from the Cambria County Coroner's office.
His secretary called and said, hey, Wally, if you need any help with that plane crash, call us. And I'm like, what plane crash? She said, a plane crashed out of Lambertsville. I said, what kind of a plane? A jet.
Wally got through to 911 only by his county radio and got word of an unconfirmed report of a plane crashing in Lambertsville. He got in his truck and went out to the scene.
Well, where is this crash? Well, this is it. I said, well, no, I see debris, but, where is it? I thought I'd see like a big fuselage missing a wing or something. They're like, no, this is it.
A piece of earth in an empty field near the edge of a strip mine, scorched.
A piece of earth. He goes, nah, this is it. Now you can see into the forest, okay?
Wally says hemlock trees looked like burned matchsticks.
We walked up through there, and there was just like smoke and fog everywhere, and all you could smell was jet fuel. And I can remember walking through there, and I could hear melted plastic dripping out of the trees, hitting the ground, like sizzling. And boy, that was a really eerie feeling. And we'd just go through those trees and looking for items, personal effects and remains and anything we could find. And we did, we found a lot. So, and then down in the woods, there was a lot of things got knocked up in the air, and the wind took some of it down. Some of it was at Indian Lake. There was mail on that plane. Some of that got found as far away as New Baltimore.
But the main
New
priority
Baltimore.
for Wally...
So again, he brings up New Baltimore, and that's what led me to this clip. And we'll show you again over a mountain ridge, and you see what's happening up in the sky up there. Once again, did something else happen in the air? Because when he gets there, and again, he sees no kind of plane. Wait do you hear the FBI agent say the same thing? All right?
In the midst of the largest investigation of his career, was preserving the solemn ground where the 40 passengers and crew of Flight 93 perished.
I have long maintained that this is essentially a cemetery. The vast majority of remains were not recoverable, and so we covered that whole area there where the plane hit the ground. We covered that up with topsoil, so essentially it was just a large mass grave.
Does that make sense to anybody? In an open field, that he's saying that basically the vast majority of humans were unrecoverable.
Not what he said. Again, you made it a habit, especially in loose change. All right. This is a habit of taking him out of context. He basically said the vast majority of the human remains were not recoverable. That's what he said, not the vast majority of humans. And yes, he's talking about the small particles that were left of the people, because basically Wally Miller in the Somerset County recovered 600 pounds, approximately 8% of the people on the plane. What was it, 45, I believe, including the crew? The biggest part of a human remain, a biggest part of the body was a piece of the backbone, right? That's exactly what would be found after it being slammed into the ground at 563 miles an hour with 78,000 pounds of fuel. They were blown to smithereens. There ain't going to be no blood. There's not going to be any type of liquid from the body that's going to be found. It's basically vaporized in the explosion. Doesn't take rocket science to figure this out. But like I said, if you're going to compare this to a regular plane crash that you're used to seeing, which is a rare anomaly, with the intentional plane crash, an extremely rare anomaly, then that's disingenuous. I don't know how many times I have to say it, but I can understand completely how people can make this mistake. But you don't do any favors here, Jason, by not saying, hey, you know what? I researched the 1771 crash site, and yeah, that definitely looks like Shanksville. A plane going into the ground at high speed, and very few pieces of the plane managed to survive, and no whole bodies were found. Thereby, the challenge that you set to McDermott on with McDermott's interview has been met by at least DJ Thermal Detonator. If you're just going to dismiss me because the topography is wrong, because my plane crash was into a mountain. But the point being, Jason, was that intentional plane crashes at high speeds are not going to leave behind large pieces of the plane or whole bodies. That was the whole point. And also with you taking Wally Miller out of context, you did that there. You did that there. And yeah, Wally Miller has never been to a plane crash site. He even says that in numerous interviews he's done. And of course, he's thinking, oh, a plane had crashed. It didn't intentionally crash. He didn't know. He just got the call, hey, a plane crashed here. So he's probably thinking, oh, like a regular plane crash that, you know, I may have seen on TV once or twice, or maybe not at all. But how many times has he been to an intentional plane crash site? You know, there was a CIT member named Dominic DiMaggio who basically went and interviewed Wally Miller. And basically, Wally Miller does not do interviews anymore, thanks to people like yourself and Dominic DiMaggio, who take him out of context. I tried to reach out to Wally Miller to try to get him on the Darkened Hour podcast. He won't do any more interviews ever again. God, thank you for that, partly. But Dominic DiMaggio also said that when he visited Wally Miller was showing him pictures of pieces of the human remains, the plane debris that was found. Dominic DiMaggio basically ignored all that and said, yeah, Wally Miller basically is covering everything up at Shanksville. He said that on Dave Meesweek's show one time. I think it was in the year 2011. I forgot the name of the show. Quantum Radio. Dave Meesweek was actually a co-founder of the 9/11 Lawyers Committee for 9/11 Inquiry. He's no longer part of it anymore. Thank God. But yeah, I mean, Wally Miller basically has never been to a plane crash. And so of course, when he gets to Shanksville, he's going to be like, yeah, where's the wings? Where's the tail? Not knowing that the plane crashed intentionally to the ground at 560 miles an hour, not knowing what a plane does when it's crashed intentionally to the ground at that high speed with that much fuel. And they did find fuselage. They did find part of the engines in the impact site. And yes, they found the red bandana. I know you make a big deal of this. Well, they found the red bandana, but there's no whole bodies. Well, if you don't know the difference between a heavy object and a light object, I don't know what to tell you. Then you're worse than me on physics, and I'm pretty bad. I generally suck at physics. That's why you won't hear me talking about World Trade Center 1, 2, and 7. I'm not qualified to speak on that. My opinion is futile, meaningless. But let's continue.
So you look
You
at
can't
Saudi
find
Arabia.
Jason. You're not looking hard enough, guys. Okay, go ahead. Sorry.
But you talk about Saudi Arabia and how the majority of them came from Saudi Arabia. Now, why is that? 17 of the 19 official hijackers came from Saudi Arabia. Well, if you believe Michael J. Springman, and he's in my film Fabled Enemies, he was at the visa office, and he was being told in the 90s, where he would blow the whistle and resign, to be giving passports to people he would later find out were in the bin Laden network to the United States that should never have been given these passports. So why do that? Well, because he later found out that was a Central Intelligence Agency run embassy. So they were deciding who was getting in and out. The Saudi Arabians have had a cozy relationship with the Bush family, especially the bin Laden family, who are basically oligarchs there.
Well, that's pretty strange that you would mention that the Saudis were involved. How are they involved? Quite frankly, how are they involved? If they're involved with the hijackings, but you don't believe that those hijacked planes crashed into the World Trade Center, Pentagon, and Shanksville, what crime was committed? Air piracy? Prove it. How do you do that? And then what sense would it make to not allow these planes to crash where they crashed? How is it that they found human remains of passengers and crew at all these sites? Is that all fabricated? Well, how do you prove that? Now, you may have the convenience of saying it on your show, but in a debate, Jason, you would be held accountable for the statements that you make. And this is the reason why I'm 99.9% certain you'll never debate myself or Nelson, DJ Thermodetonator, or even Ryan Dawson for that matter. But yeah, I don't get this whole ideal of Saudi Arabia being involved. Well, how could they be involved if they didn't crash at any of these sites? How is it possible? I mean, you even go as far to say that the phone calls are even legitimate. It's almost like halfway, and then the other half, you fall off the cliff. You're driving straight down the road at 60 miles an hour. You're wheezing by, and then all of a sudden, out of nowhere, you just drive right off the cliff. How is that possible? Why would you do that? Right? Why would you make this mistake? I don't get it. This is what bugs me, right? I don't get it. And then you know how many people you would have to involve to cover this up? People at the NTSB, all the first responders at New York, Pennsylvania, and Washington, D.C., who were involved with the search and rescue. The manufacturing of plane debris found at all three sites in broad daylight with no one seeing it. I mean, how do you do that? Why would you do that? I mean, isn't it so much easier to have like the intelligence agencies knowing about an attack before it happens, which would make sense because the NSA and the CIA, in which you even say were involved in monitoring these people. I'm with you there. And then with that foreknowledge, they could warn, say, NORAD, well, let's do some exercises. You don't have to involve many people in that. Let's do some aerial exercises or annual exercises. Amalgam Virgo 1, Amalgam Virgo 2, Vigilant Guardian, Global Guardian. And basically, there's no air defense. And there wasn't. So now you have these hijackers that come in the country on temp visas, basically, which you just brought up with J. Michael Springman, who's at the Jeddah consulate office, who basically put, I think it was 16 applications on hold. And I think 12 of them were related to the hijackers of 9/11. At the time, he didn't know that. Nobody knew. But those applications were put on hold because why? They were incomplete. Many of them couldn't speak English. Many of them didn't have money. Many of them didn't know where they were going inside the United States. So he found it to be suspicious. And who overruled him? Shania Steiger. Shania Steiger, who is basically a CIA asset inside the consular office. And when he complained, he got fired. So these hijackers, they get their visas anyway. They come inside the United States. They're monitored by who? Israel and Saudi Arabia, because the CIA is legally not allowed to operate inside the United States, especially a black operation like this. But the NSA, we're listening to some phone calls here in the States, one of them being a cell phone by Nawaf al-Hazmi, who you even care to mention was part of the hijacking of Flight 77. So while they're inside the United States, you have these foreign intelligence rings, and then you have domestic intelligence monitoring abroad, in which you all agree this even happened. But for some reason, on the day itself, and even on the day itself, you're all the way up to where they hijack the planes, the phone calls are legitimate, and then out of the blue, they're swapped. And your evidence is that because you believe that the planes were drones with missiles underneath them, because you think there are pods underneath these planes. Jason, I can't understand why, where, all right, you were doing so good up until the hijackings and phone calls. And then out of the blue, you basically give this wild fringe tangent that is based on no evidence whatsoever. You can't prove any of this happened. You can't prove a swap. You can't prove that there was pods underneath these planes. Your evidence is that, the photograph looks like there's a pod underneath it, and there's a flash right before the plane hits the building. Well, that's friction. That's kinetic energy, where a large object going at a high speed is meeting another large object. And not only that, that's a missile. Why does the flash disappear? Why shouldn't there be a giant explosion right after that? It comes seconds later, when the plane is fully injected into the building. The flash just disappears. What happened? If that's a missile, first of all, why would you need a missile? The plane is basically a missile itself. It's carrying 78 to 80,000 pounds of fuel. You don't need a missile. I just don't get it. And if that's the case and there's no hijackers of these planes, how do you hold Saudi Arabia responsible?
Well, hey, man.
How is that possible? This is what I don't get about you. It's fascinating because I wouldn't compare you to like Rebecca Roth. Rebecca Roth, everything she says is false. Even her wig, she don't even use her real hair. It's not her real name. Everything about her is fake, 100%. She's never been an airline stewardess. It's not her name. God knows what her real name. Monica Gaynor, Corianne Ashley, Teresa something, Rebecca Roth, Nothing about her is legitimate. Christopher Bolin, here's another one who mixes up some truth with falsehoods. That there is a problem with Israeli foreign policy mixing with U.S. foreign policy. There's a lot of truth in that. But then he claims that World Trade Center 6 was hit by a missile, and that's why you see that round hole, and that the planes weren't hijacked, that Daniel Lewin somehow took over the plane. There's no evidence behind that at all. And everything is Jew, Israeli, Israeli. The whole Jews are the evil of the world. I mean, come on, man. Barbara Honegger. I mean, look, here's a former official for the White House, right? She worked in some capacity under the Reagan administration. You know, if you want to see a real spook, there it is, right? You know, and she's basically came out of the blue with the truth movement and started propagating all these fringe conspiracies, especially about the Pentagon. You basically have it half right. And it's remarkable because at least you basically say the planes are hijacked, that the phone calls are legitimate. Heck, you even care to mention the Malaysia summit meeting. I mean, I got to give you credit for that. But then, incredibly, you do a Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, and then reverse course and say the planes are actually drones and there's missiles underneath because there was a swap in midair. Jay, what evidence are you using for this? What information do you have that was possible? I don't care about speculative theories. I want factual information because, Jason, if you have information that I don't have and I want to correct the issue, well, then I want to hear what you have. I don't want to be wrong. That's not the basis of my channel, nor is it DJ Thermal Detonators or Ryan Dawson's. I don't see you as an enemy. I mean, yeah, I'm quite anal when it comes to facts and fiction. And yeah, I could get sometimes aggressive with that. But I mean, after 21 years, Jason, there are still a large part of the truth movement that don't even think planes were even real. Do you realize that this Saturday, there's going to be a huge 12-hour conference about a debate whether a plane crashed into the Pentagon? We're 21 years in for 9/11, and that's going to be the big truth movement debate. I can't tell you how astonished I am that after 21 years, the truth movement, the peak of the truth movement, this is it. They're debating for 12 hours whether a plane was actually crashing into the Pentagon. Not just a plane, but a hijacked plane. Heck, Thierry Mason doesn't even think a plane hit the Pentagon. He thinks it's a missile. Even though 86 people are on record who were actually there, unlike him, who saw a plane crash into the building. How is this a debate? Yeah, I'm frustrated because I take this matter seriously. And then look, I happen to think you're a cool guy. I said this to DJ Thermal Detonator already many times. You know, you like MMA. I love MMA. I mean, God, I could show you pictures of the 1,000 magazines and 800 DVDs and what 400 programs I collect regarding, you know, multiple organizations around the world. I'm a rare programmer collector. I have every single Pride FC program, every single one. It took me 12 years to do it. I don't hate you. I mean, I didn't block you or nothing, but you called me a troll. And I'm like, how? All right, I could understand if I had like a fake account that was making fun of you. I have a legitimate account. I use my real name. This is my face. This is me. I'm trying to help the truth movement, not hurt it. But by propagating these theories, Jason, of no planes and no hijackers and missiles, and anything, this is not helping the truth movement. I want to go to court. I don't want to live on YouTube. Yeah, it's nice. I'm sharing valid information. I have a WordPress. You know what I put on there? All files and documents. It's up to almost 4,000 now. Because what I'm hoping for is in the future, we become more educated about the subject, and that those people that follow me and look at my work and whatever, what I'm sharing, that they create their own channels and they become bigger and they affect more people than I ever could. That's how you build a movement. That's a truth movement. Not a speculative movement, not a theory movement, not a fringe movement, what the 9/11 truth movement is now. You know, it takes guts to admit when you're wrong. I've done it a couple of times. Even in certain videos, I do re-edits. I even mentioned where I was wrong in my edits. I try to be 100% all the time. Impossible. Because I'm always learning about 9/11. It never stops. Because in the future, we're still going to learn. 20 years from now, even when I'm dead. And if we're going to hold somebody responsible, we got to be 100% right. Because if we're wrong about one thing, that's all they need. Oh, you see, they're just like Alex Jones. You see, they're just like Christopher Bolin. You see, they're just like Rebecca Roth. They question the government, but they're fringe conspiracy theorists. What they said is wrong. And that's how you can generalize a movement. Even though we still have good people in the movement. Very few, but there's still some good people. And we could use your voice. But you got to admit you're wrong. And here's what you said at the end of Reed Coverdale's show when you were on it.
Well, hey, man, I know you got to run. I appreciate you coming on. I'm just going to make an open invitation. You don't have to answer right here if you don't want, but I do. I know you and Ryan Dawson have not gotten along in the past, but I do the Four Horsemen show with our mutual friend, Eric Jackman and Ryan Dawson. So I am openly inviting you to be a guest on that show in the name of free speech. I think that would be very interesting.
Listen, I have no problem with going on any kind of show. I'll just say this. It's kind of like that meme and the attacking. That's another thing that I really don't do. When I talk about, Jones has a huge platform, and I certainly never attack him or try not to attack him as a person. I'll tell you what, when he told everybody that God had told him to strike down Joe Rogan, it was hard for me not to be like, come on, Jones, give me a fucking break, right?
Yeah.
But I've never been that person, and I think it's unfortunate when that happens. At the same time, I'm willing to debate anybody on any subject. So perhaps sometime down the line, we'll definitely do that, Reed.
Tell you what, Jason, I'll even apologize for my past behavior toward you, right? Because I came off arrogant, or I came off very snide, right? I hope I'm really trying to help people regarding the subject. And, I don't reach many people. I mean, I really don't. I know I'm not. And I'm not in this for money. I'm not in this for fame. I don't even have a freaking Patreon account. I do this because I look at 9/11 and I see how sorely misrepresented it is. And you know what? If you want to have a conversation instead of a debate, I'm more than willing to have that with you. If you want to use Reed Coverdale as a moderator, and that guy's beautiful, right? I'm so glad I ran into that guy, because I'm really impressed with that young man. He is the perfect moderator for something like that. He doesn't take sides. He's partial. He's not led by any ideology, and I respect the heck out of that guy. And I don't reference many people. But man, was it a benefit for me to have met him online, at least, and have spoken with him. He's been gracious in having me on twice. But I would love to just have a discussion with you. The heck with a debate. You know what? I'll even throw that away. Let's have a three-way discussion between me, you, and Reed Coverdale. If you want to have somebody, I don't know who else you want to invite or whatever, or if you just think it's just us three, is fine. Or if it's not me, then it's DJ Thermal Detonator, or it's Ryan Dawson. I want to get somewhere. On YouTube, it can't be the last stop. This is not the peak. No way. We can't get anywhere. Now, like I said before, this is a great platform to reach a huge amount of people. Yes, it's restrictive. It's unfortunate, but it's still the most popular platform in the world. And I have Odyssey. I don't have Rovkin because I don't have a bigger crowd. Now I've asked Rovkin, if I could create a account, just no, you don't have a big account. I think I have 1,700 people that follow me. To me, I'm blown away that there's 1,700 people that follow me on YouTube. I'm stunned. And I vet people. Like I don't want just anybody follow me. I want people who are at least interested in learning from the channel and then creating their own content and sharing that information. And I don't want them to just believe me. I want them to come away with knowledge, information, because with knowledge, we can act on it. I think you could agree with that. Heck, I think you wanted, I've heard it, you said it before. You want a new investigation. Guess what, Jason? So do I. But we can't go there with saying, oh, we think that there's missiles underneath these planes. You know what would happen to us? We would get thrown out for a frivolous lawsuit. That's what happened with April Gallup. April Gallup, who I love the truth movement, basically used her as evidence that no plane crashed at the Pentagon. Meanwhile, in 2011, she went on and sued who? Not just Donald Rumsfeld, Richard Myers, but Osama bin Laden and American Airlines. You know why? And this is a quote from her. If those competing theories are true, then I got to take advantage because I'm a victim. She said that. That's a quote. What does that tell you? Her lawsuit was thrown out, and the judge fined the 3 lawyers that were with her for such a terribly frivolous lawsuit. I want to hold people like George Tenet for at least perjury. Because he said to Carl Levin at the Joint House Inquiry that nobody read those cables regarding Khalid al-Mihdhar and Wafa Hazmi that were inside the United States. Nobody read the cable. Meanwhile, 53 agents read it. That's coming from Lawrence Wright. I've interviewed Mark Rossini, the FBI agent who worked at Alex Station. I've interviewed Ken Williams, who wrote the Phoenix Memo. I've interviewed Anthony Schaefer and Eric Kleinsmith, who were part of Able Danger. Colleen Rowley, Minneapolis Police, Minneapolis FBI. These are the real whistleblowers who are telling you that they had information regarding hijackers inside the United States. And their superiors ignored them or didn't read the information until it was too late. I've interviewed the incident commander at the Pentagon. I am the only, can you believe this? I'm the only person in the 9/11 truth movement in 21 years to interview and reach out to the Pentagon incident commander, James Schwartz, who is the fire chief, the assistant fire chief in Arlington County. He was there, I think, 6 minutes on impact, after the impact. And he stood there, I think, for the next 8 weeks, in charge of all the search and rescue operations, and in charge of containing the fire. How is that possible? And like I said, I'm a nobody. I got, 1,000 people follow me. How is it a small channel like me gets to interview actual whistleblowers? We're not talking about Kevin Ryan or there's another whistleblower they claim is a whistleblower. As of recent, Adam Eisenberg or Barbara Honegger. How is Honegger a whistleblower? These guys were actual whistleblowers for the agencies, and they got either ignored or dismissed or in trouble. It wasn't hard to reach out to some of these people. I wish that many people did. And you know what, Jason, you're a young guy. I'm 52. What are you, about 38, 39? You've been in the game far longer than I have. I studied 9/11 since 2006. And I just made viral media 10 years later. And one of the reasons was because I don't like my accent very much. It's, I'm very self-conscious, that nobody was going to take me seriously and stuff. But there's too many wrong people who are reaching the right audience and promoting disinformation. And I can't tell you, Jason, how many people in the truth movement, I can name at least no exaggeration, probably 50 who promote fringe conspiracies that ended up hurting the truth movement. And so with that, Jason, here's my, my invitation to you, let's talk. Let's have a conversation without the debate parameters. Just have a discussion, a real heart-to-heart discussion about this subject, because we need people. Now, I don't want to sit in an echo chamber. How is that making progress? I think we share a lot in common. And I think that in regards to 9/11, you're more often right than wrong. But the wrong stuff that you promote is based on, I think it's just based on hard speculation. I think we can hash that out. And because if we don't hash it out, and if you continue to promote these ideas as facts, what you're going to be left with are people like this.
It could have been a plane with damn explosives on it.